Welcome to jazzstreaming.com. We are broadcasting live from New Orleans, Louisiana, the birthplace of jazz. Our location for this episode of jazzstreaming.com is Capulet, located at 3014 Dauphine Street, New Orleans, Louisiana, 70117. Capulet is a hip little restaurant in a fabulously renovated warehouse with a roof deck, offering live music, delicious cocktails, and feel-good food. Our guest for this episode of Jazz Streaming is Mr. Herman LeBeaux, percussionist, composer, arranger, educator, and native New Orleanian. Herman, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
We're looking at a clip of you performing here at Capulet with the NOLA Resistance Quintet a few weeks ago. You look like you were having fun.
Yes, having a great time, playing with great musicians, great club, great atmosphere. Everything was perfect.
So Herman, tell us a bit about your childhood growing up in New Orleans.
Well, my early childhood was spent pursuing sports. My family was really big into recreational activities, and I had an uncle who was a football coach at Hardin Park in the 7th Ward. And so from maybe 8 to 12, I played basketball and football. And in fact, I held a record for Nord Playground,
Really?
95-pound football team. I threw the longest touchdown pass. It was a 23-yard touchdown pass, and I think that record lasted for over 10 years. So I was really pumped up about becoming,
very impressive.
Professional athlete.
Yeah, and I understand that you have Cuban roots in your family.
Yes, my grandmother is Cuban. Both of her parents were born in Havana. And by the time that my grandmother was born, I think they moved to Tampa, Florida, and then eventually found their way to New Orleans.
Yeah. Where'd you go to school before college?
I went to Valena C. Jones for elementary. I went to Andrew J. Bell for junior high and St. Augustine High School.
Yeah. So what experience did you have at Andrew J. Bell that influenced your decision to choose music as a career path?
Well, let me tell you, Andrew J. Bell was a mecca, for musicians. It was in the heart of the Treme, and so the culture, the whole vibe and everything, you had a lot of people that grew up listening to second lines, a lot of people that participated in second lines, and so these people were also a part of the band. And so there's a lot of competition, an abundance of talent, and most importantly, Donald Richardson was the band director, and he was the person that actually took an interest in me and encouraged me, along with another classmate, to study private lessons. And so I think that was the seed that sort of planted, for me to continue on.
Yeah, so you went to St. Augustine High School, but you wanted to go to the New Orleans Center of Creative Arts here in New Orleans, NOCA.
Yes. A lot of my friends who were at Andrew J. Bell in the band with me, they were going on to public schools, which allowed them the opportunity to go to NOCA, New Orleans Center for Creative Arts. And they were all going to NOCA so that they could study with Mr. Ellis Marcellus. And I knew of that, but family tradition would have it that I would be the next generation of the Purple Knight.
Oh, so you had legacy.
Yes.
Tell
my
us about
uncles, my mother's brothers, my father, and my father's brothers all went to St. Augustine. And so it was kind of predestined.
Yeah, so you played in the school band?
Yes, I did.
You're a Purple Knight.
Yes.
Interesting.
Actually, I was
Parades,
drum major my senior year.
Really?
Yes.
You still have the moves?
Don't think so.
So listen, fast forward to 1988, you graduated from Xavier University here in New Orleans with a degree in music.
That was a very, very interesting time because Xavier University music department toured once a year. We had a spring tour, and so I had the unique opportunity as a college student to see the majority of the United States. We did Midwest tours, East Coast tours, West Coast, etc. And so in addition to that, we had a jazz combo that was invited to go to Central America and South America to perform. So as you know, while I was in college, I was also gaining the experience of traveling on the road and getting an opportunity to see what that like. So it really, really prepared me for,
it broadened your perspective.
Yes.
So what was going on with the music business here in New Orleans at that time?
That's a good question. Jazz-wise, there wasn't a whole lot happening. I think Wynton Marsalis was just about to make his move as the top guy, for jazz. In fact, a lot of people said that he saved jazz because there weren't young people who were interested. So to answer your question, here in New Orleans, Snug Harbor was one club. I think Tyler's.
On Magazine Street.
Right. Ellis Marsalis had a gig there. And aside from that, there were probably a lot of small clubs that were supporting jazz. But for a young, aspiring musician, there were not many opportunities to perform.
So you received some help from your professor at Xavier.
Right. Well, I talked to Ellis, and he mentioned Amherst, UMass, as a possibility of schools to go to because UNO did not offer a master's at that time. And he mentioned that Max Roach was on the faculty.
Wow.
So fast forward, I went back to my professor at Xavier University, Dr. Malcolm Breeder, and he just happened to know the choir director at Amherst University. And so he made the phone call and made the connection, and next thing I knew, I was getting on a plane to audition to go to Amherst to possibly study with the famous Max Roach.
We are streaming live from New Orleans near the banks of the Mississippi River at Capulet, the hippest venue for live music, smooth cocktails, and feel-good food, located in the Bywater neighborhood at 3014 Dauphine Street, New Orleans, Louisiana, 70117. And I'm Sally Young, serving as guest host for this episode of JazzStreaming.com. This live stream is being supported in part by a Jazz and Heritage Foundation Community Partnership Grant awarded to Julius A. Evans, this show's producer. For more information about the Jazz and Heritage Foundation, visit www.jazzandheritage.org. So, Herman, let's watch a clip of you swinging.
Sure.
Yeah, so give us a play-by-play analysis of this performance. This was recorded here at Capulet with you sitting in on a gig with the NOLA Resistance Quintet, a subset of the largest NOLA Resistance band managed by Matt Dillon.
Well, I know Chris Severin, Darryl Levine, Roderick Paulin, Andrew Baham are all first-rate musicians. And this was a pleasure. This is actually our first gig. And it just, the vibe was right. Everything seemed to work. So I'm happy, as you can see.
I'm looking.
And I'm really checking out this ride cymbal, and I'm thinking about Max Roach and what he said about the ride cymbal, that it's the most important instrument of the jazz drum set. If you're going to be a jazz drummer, you have to learn or establish a relationship with the ride cymbal.
Hey, I want to give some Special thanks to Matt Dillon, the organization's manager, for permission to use this clip, by the way. Yeah, can you talk about this? What's going on in your mind right now?
Time, energy, making it feel good, making sure that I'm honest, listening to the musicians, and responding appropriately.
Mm-hmm. You're working hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can see you
I just
counting.
found out that in the olden days, the cymbals were called the shingles.
The shingles.
And
Why?
a lot of the blues musicians used to tell the drummers to stay off of the shingles because they wanted to hear the drums. They wanted them to play whatever you're going to play on the cymbal, you play it on the snare drum. But when in jazz, it's just the opposite. You know, the energy comes from the cymbal. And here the volume is getting like really, really soft because we're featuring the bass, which is another, feature in jazz. You know, when certain musicians are performing, you have to be able to adjust your volume. It's not just one volume from beginning to end. There's a lot that happens in between, you know, the moments in the song that you have to be sensitive to. And so it's something that jazz drummers, I think, are a little bit more aware of because of the nature of the music.
Mm-hmm.
Max Roach used to call it quiet fire, being able to play
fire.
soft with intensity, you know, not relying on volume to produce excitement. Well, as I said earlier, Ellis was the one who mentioned Amherst University, and he knew that Max Roach was studying there, thought that that might be a great opportunity. And so professor at Xavier University, Dr. Malcolm Breeder, called Dr. Horace Boyer, who was the choir director at Amherst, and he set up the audition for me to go to Amherst, and jumped on a plane, first time flying on a plane, rented a car in Boston, and drove 2.5 hours to Amherst for the audition, played the audition, drove back from Amherst to Boston, flew back home. It was quite an experience.
And then what did you hear?
Well, a few days passed, and they called. They called and told me that I was accepted.
So you go to Amherst, and
Yes.
you studied under Max Roach.
In addition to a lot of other people, Yusef Lateef was on the faculty, Dr.
Really?
Billy Taylor, Jeff Holmes was the coordinator of the jazz studies, and Dr. Frederick Tillis was the chairman of the African American Studies program. So it was a bunch of people who were well respected, not only in education but also as a performer.
Well, it sounds intense.
It was an enormous challenge.
No. We're going to take a short break. We've got some drinks arriving. Look, here's some of the small fare and the feel-good food.
Yes.
Oh, this is beautiful.
This is our crispy pork belly with apple butter and pickled fennel.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. This
Thank
is
you.
just a sampling. This is a sampling of some of the things that you can find at Capulet. So, hey.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers to you. Okay, so you made a detour back to New Orleans that would change the course of your future as a bebop musician. What happened?
Well, the challenge was to move to New York and not get a day job, because obviously
That's a
it's
challenge.
the hardest place in the world to live, right?
Mm-hmm.
Financially. And so I had made the decision to return back to New Orleans momentarily, work a while, try to build up some capital, and then eventually move to Brooklyn. That was the plan. And everything was going well.
So you're playing here. Who are you playing with?
I was playing with Johnny Bashman, a pianist, and he gave me about 2 months' worth of dates, and I figured this is perfect. So started playing with Johnny and Willie Metcalf, Earl Turpinton, Red Tyler, Johnny Adams, Charles Neville, and a few others that I probably can't remember at this time. But Johnny was my main gig, and I made the fatal mistake of mentioning to him my plans, which was to move to New York. And when he found that out, he decided to let me go because I was not a part of the long-term plan that he had.
So would you call that Business 101?
It's called Business 101. Never share your business. Never tell your next move to anyone. The greatest lesson that I learned from Max Roach was to be honest with yourself. And there are a lot of things that you can learn. There are a lot of things that you can study, while pursuing music as a career. But at the end of the day, the audience can relate to your honesty, and they feel that. It has to come from the heart. So I guess that would be the most important lesson. And there were many, but that would probably be at the top of the list.
You're back in New Orleans. You get fired from the Bashman gig. And then you went on tour with Doreen Ketchens, a jazz clarinetist that's here from New Orleans, that you went to school with, too.
Doreen and I attended Andrew J. Bell Junior High School. We were in the same grade all 3 years, and she's just a phenomenal musician, extraordinary. Could have very easily have pursued classical music. And in my estimation, she would have been the first chair clarinetist for the New Orleans Symphony. And
she actually has performed with LPO in recent years. So
Yes. So Doreen called, and out of the blue, and they were looking for a drummer. They, as in Doreen and Lawrence.
Her husband.
They were looking for her husband. They were looking for a drummer to go to Taipei, Taiwan. They had a 2-month gig, and when she called, it was like music to my ears because I was like, well, this is the ticket. When I returned from Taipei, I could go straight to New York and continue on with pursuing my career as a jazz bebop musician.
A bebop musician.
Bebop.
So then, did you also form your own group?
After going over to Taipei with Doreen and Lawrence, by the third time, the club owner encouraged me to put together a band of my own. And I was able to do that, and we went over maybe two or three times, and did quite well. Yeah.
That's amazing. So then you were also with Lillian Boutté in Europe for a while.
Right. A few years after playing with Lawrence and Doreen, I received a call from Lillian because Johnny Vodakovich, a local drummer here in New Orleans with an impeccable reputation, I think he was taking off for that summer. He would normally travel with Lillian during the summers. And so, yeah.
Let's take a look. Let's look at Lillian. Is that you in the background?
Yes.
This is at Jazz Ascona, right?
Jazz Ascona. That's right. She's a great musician. Very professional. Very much a New Orleanian. It's amazing what she did for New Orleans over in Europe.
Is that Trisha and Tanya?
Trisha and Tanya. That's like Phil Parnell on piano.
Right, Phil Parnell.
Yes. Danny Lett on guitar, and I can't remember the name of the bassist.
That's a great shot.
Yeah.
Lillian Boutté. Well, you got quite a history. Well, things were going really well for you, and then you became the son-in-law of the late, great Allen Toussaint.
Right. So I guess after Doreen and Lawrence, Lillian Boutté, and playing with just about the who's who in New Orleans of musicians, I began to, I guess, get a reputation as a fairly decent drummer. And the opportunity presented itself for me to do a studio session, I think, with Mr. Toussaint. I think that's the first time that I played with him. Called me to do a session, no rehearsal, just to show up. And I think the name of the song was the title of the CD that he ended up doing, which is called Connected. And that started my relationship with Mr. Toussaint, which lasted for well over 20 years.
So you started talking to Allison Toussaint, his daughter. Did that surprise your bandmates?
It did. In fact, before I received the call for the studio session, I met Allison at Snug Harbor one evening, and we started talking, and one thing led to another, and we both fell in love at some point, and started a long, beautiful relationship. We have 2 wonderful kids, and we're happily married, and I'm probably one of the luckiest guys in the world.
I agree.
Yes.
So talk about Allen Toussaint, the writer, producer. You're firsthand working in CSAIT.
Well, I think when you walk into the studio, any musician that walked into the studio, there's a certain fear that comes over you because you know what you're about to walk into. You're walking into a situation with someone who has proven themselves, and they know what they want, and it's your job to produce. And I had heard lots of stories about how tough it was, during those sessions. So,
did you have other studio experience before that?
Very little, yeah. So this was, I guess after dealing with Max, and talking and getting the confidence from him, I was ready to take on the world. So even though I was a bit afraid, I knew that I had the ability to do the job. And I remember during the session, there was a point where he stopped the band and he questioned me about the way I was playing a certain phrase, which is quite different from what he wanted. Mm-hmm. And so this is the test, right? I thought to myself, well, here's my big moment. I'm either going to make it or break it. And it had something to do with me putting a certain part of the drum set on a certain part of the beat, such as the and of 3 or the E of 4, whatever it was at that time. And I nailed it. And I learned very quickly that once you do it the way that he wants you to do it, then he'll leave you alone until the next time.
Until the next time. That's beautiful. Okay, as you know, in 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and Allen Toussaint, the writer, producer, became a touring artist. So tell us about that, your relationship with him at that point.
Well, when Hurricane Katrina hit, Mr. Toussaint vacated to New York, and he lived there for many, many years after Katrina. And I guess with the world opening up their arms to the city of New Orleans, a lot of musicians were getting gigs all over the place. So New York was no different. And he took on, I think it was an agent, which started booking him as a performing artist, which is something that he did every now and then. But this meant that he would have to do tours, he would have to record, become a performing musician. And so he did just that, and he did it in fine fashion. Just a first-class experience from top to bottom. I mean, from the hotels to the accommodations.
Well, here's a clip right here with Elvis Costello. There's
Right.
Allen on the left.
Yeah.
You want to tell us about this?
Well, that Elvis Costello tour was probably the hardest thing that I'd ever done in my life, physically, because Elvis was the type of musician that played 2.5 to 3 hours straight, no breaks. And whereas in jazz music, you know, you have one person playing and another person takes a solo, another person. This was a show from beginning to end. And so, once again, it was a chance to prove to myself that I could do it. It was a really big shoes to fill, because Elvis had mentioned to me that he had never played with another drummer on tour. You know, but this is the first, and forever grateful for it.
Not to mention that you were displaced after the storm.
Yes.
So that was a whole nother level of discomfort. Yeah.
Exactly. We went to Cypress, Texas, and we lived with Allison's brother, Reginald, and his family, and we were all in one house together until we decided to make the move back.
Oh, we're glad you did. So
Glad
who
I
else
did.
did you play with at this period of time with Allen?
Oh, goodness. A lot of musicians. One thing about Allen Toussaint is he was well respected all over the world by the greatest musicians, from Elton John on down. So
Cindi
whenever he
Lauper.
showed up, you know, he had the respect of all of those people. And such as this is Cindi Lauper, great energy.
Yeah, and a great synergy between the two of them.
Yes. She thinks very differently, you know, from other musicians. She's off the beating path for sure. And she knows what she wants, but it's just different.
Interesting.
This is at Madison Square Garden, and this was the concert after about a week after Katrina.
A week?
Maybe a week or two. Yeah, where they put together this major concert.
So this was a benefit.
Yes. One rehearsal, short rehearsal, and then on the stage to a full.
One call, that's all.
Yeah, that's it. Sold out, Madison Square Garden.
I'm not surprised. So who else is in this band?
Sue and Ed are on vocals, and all of the other members were the members that have been performing with him over the years. Chris Severin, I think Anthony Brown, the horns, Amity Castanel, Tracy Griffith, Brian Cayo. Hope I'm not leaving anyone out.
He just started again.
Yeah. I think Mr. Toussaint would say this song has hips.
I like that. Well, I know that often Allen chose local musicians whenever he could.
Yes, he did. Taught me a valuable lesson, you know, to be loyal. And he...
Ah, there you are.
Oh, okay. This is
Buckwheat Zydeco.
Buckwheat Zydeco. Wow. Sonny Landry and Lenny Kravitz.
Now, where is this?
It's the same concert, Madison Square Garden.
So how did they pull that together? Is it anybody that could get there? Because that was monumental. A week after Katrina?
Well, you know, that's a
New York?
question that I really can't answer. I just know that I only had one suit, and was no suitcase. Just good Lenny.
Was Reggie there that night?
Yes. Yes.
So Reggie, his son, is a percussionist in his band, but also part of the management team.
Reggie's the manager, right. Was always the manager. And when we started traveling after Hurricane Katrina, the group got smaller and smaller. And at that he started staying home a little bit more, and I began to take on more responsibilities of being the contact person on the road. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever had the experience to travel with someone as famous as Mr. Toussaint, it's quite a job.
Well, give us a few thoughts, being respectful of the fact that the Toussaint family is still grieving over the loss of Allen Toussaint. A few thoughts on Allen Toussaint, the man.
The man. The most giving person that I know. Caring. Will do anything for you. And just everything about him is positive. You talk to him today, you talk to him next week, you talk to him next month. How you doing, Mr. Toussaint? Wonderful. Great.
Positive.
It's a wonderful time. I'm writing. I'm happy. Happy to be alive.
I want to look at this picture, this image. What are we looking at? What is this piano?
This is the piano that Allen Toussaint used to write the song Southern Nights. And I'm pretty sure he wrote many others, but with Southern Night being his signature song, there's a special moment.
Yeah, we're back live at Capulet, the hippest venue for great cocktails, live music, and delicious feel-good food, located at 3014 Dauphine Street in the historic district known as Bywater. We'd like to give special thanks to the staff and management of Capulet for hosting jazzstreaming.com live, and a special thanks goes to the Jazz and Heritage Foundation Community Grant Program for awarding Julius A. Evans, the show's producer, a 2023 Community Partnership Grant. I'm Sally Young, and you're watching jazzstreaming.com. And our special celebrity musician guest is Mr. Herman LeBeaux Jr., percussionist, composer, arranger, educator, and native New Orleanian. Herman, you're now creating your own music. Tell us about that.
Yes. I would say a few years ago, I purchased a music software, Logic. And after going through the learning curve with the technology and all, my generation versus the new generation, kids today can watch YouTube and learn just about anything. But it took me quite a while to get comfortable with Logic. But I'd always had a lot of musical ideas that were stored on disk, and I never knew how to transfer them over into Logic. Once I figured that out, I realized that I had a lot of music that needed to be, to be showcased at some point. And so at the present moment, I am pursuing that.
Here you are in your creative space.
Yes, my level of creativity has gone way up. I wake up every morning, and the first thought, thank God that I'm alive, and then right to it. I mean, I can get up as early as 4 o'clock in the morning, go out on my back porch, a cup of coffee, and very easily 4 hours, 5 hours, or if no one is home, as in this case, I can go to my laboratory where my keyboards, my drums, and the logic is set up, and just get to it. And I'm really having a great time. I mean, I can honestly say that I'm in a great creative space right now.
Yeah, so how do you marry melody and rhythm in your creativity, and which one is more important?
Rhythm, of course. Roger Dickerson, famous composer here in New Orleans, told me many, many years ago that rhythm is the most important element, and I 100% agree. Sorry, Quincy Jones. I know you feel
That's what I was
that the
referring
melody is the king, but
Tell us the quote from Quincy Jones.
I think Quincy said that melody is the king, and don't ever forget it. Something to that effect. But being a drummer, being from New Orleans, I feel differently.
Yeah.
You can look at the people on Sundays at the second lines, and you see very quickly what they're dancing to. They're dancing to the drums. You know,
Yeah. Do you do vocal tracks
in my house.
in your house?
Yes, yeah, alone.
So that's part of the process?
Yes, it is. Because, I mean, I feel that I have more to offer than just the instrumental component. And I found that from working with Mr. Toussaint, words are the most important in his eyes. You know, he would write all this music, and we would learn it. And then he would come back and he would say, it doesn't match the words. Everywhere I'm saying something, somebody's playing. So you need to get out of the way. Learn how to listen to the song, sing the song. Yes.
Do you still practice rudiments?
Yes, I do. Rudiments are essential. It's like drinking water. You know, you have to have that in your everyday existence. You have to work on your technique and keep your chops up so that you can be able to execute when called upon.
Are you
Yes.
playing a role in educating the new generation about bebop?
Yes, I am. At the current moment, myself along with Jonathan Bloom, we have 3 students, 3 drummers that are currently at the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts, and they're doing extremely well.
Yeah, well, you've been putting your name out there as a band leader. Is this something we can look forward to?
Yes. I've been encouraged to do more as a band leader, and I'm working towards that. That's all I can say at the present moment. I don't have any plans at this moment, but I am working towards that. We did one date at Snug Harbor a few months back, had a great time with the jazz quartet. So hopefully we'll have more.
Yeah, a while ago in our conversation, we talked about business music lessons 101 and business 102. Is there a 103?
Never give up.
Never give up.
Keep going. Keep
That's
moving.
a good one to go by. Well, how can people find you?
Facebook, on Instagram, and I'm also getting ready to start preparing for French Quarter Fest, Jazz Fest, and I have a few dates out of town. This is something that I forgot to mention. Jamie Foxx, who played Ray Charles. Mm-hmm. Of course, that movie was filmed here in New Orleans, and Jamil Sharif, a local musician, knew the producer, and it was Jamil's job to hire musicians to be a part of the movie. So we all, about 50 of us, we showed up at the studio, we auditioned, and I got the job. So I'm in the movie Ray as the drummer for a large portion of the movie. Well, fast forward, many years later, Paul Sylvester, who owns the Sweet Lorraine Jazz Club, had this wonderful idea of taking the musicians who performed in Ray's band on the movie to play with David Fathead Newman, who was in Ray's band. And so I had the opportunity to perform with David Fathead Newman at Sweet Lorraine's, along with, get this, Mark Brooks, and on piano was a young senior at the New Orleans Center of Creative Arts, Jonathan Baptiste. Remember that like it was yesterday. And it wasn't so good of an experience for me because I'll be honest with you, Mr. Newman did not care for my style of bebop drumming, if you will, and he was quite vocal about it.
So
I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
We don't go into the details of that, but I guess that's business 104, I guess, if you want to call it that.
Going was 103, so 104.
Yeah, never assume that, you're too good or that you can handle every situation, because in this business, the reality is that someone will always put you in your place.
That's a good lesson to know.
I'm very humble now. I'm honest, I'm humble, and I'm appreciative every time I sit behind the drums. Every time I get on the bandstand, I say thanks, and I try to be as honest as possible.
Yeah. Again, how do we get in touch with you to follow you and to see where you're playing?
I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. And I will be posting my dates for the French Quarter Fest and Jazz Fest.
Which is right around the corner. But on tomorrow, which is Thursday, I will be playing at the DBA with the wonderful John Boutté. And DBA
I would just like to
Frenchman Street.
On Frenchman Street, correct. I would just like to put in a plug that I'm having a wonderful time playing with that band. I think we're really starting to create something, and John is really happy, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I just saw you at the Ellis Marcellus Center of Music with John.
Right.
Great concert.
Thank you.
So looking forward to seeing you around everywhere. I want to give a special thanks to the Jazz and Heritage Foundation Community Partnership Grant Program, and a special thanks to Capulet for hosting jazzstreaming.com live. And I want to thank you, Herman LeBeaux Jr. And that concludes this episode of jazzstreaming.com. Thanks, everyone.